Bill, really nice to connect. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate your time. You are very renowned within the Australian market, specifically within talent acquisition. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Tricia. I was very honoured when you approached me and very excited to be here today.
No, you are most welcome. So I came across your profile. You're putting out quite a lot of, thought leadership content, subject matter expertise within the HR industry. And I think that's all, really, really important in terms of building your personal brand. So I would definitely love your insights, though, in terms of the recruitment world, talent acquisition, and perhaps even, how you stumbled into this domain.
Well, that's always an interesting one. So look, I might start how I stumbled into this domain. So in terms of recruitment, I completed a bachelor degree in commerce. So in Australia at the University of Wollongong, which is where I'm from. Always like the side of HR dealing with people and the side that's a bit nicer, not so much things like industrial relations. So I ended up working for a couple of international recruitment agencies, starting out in a blue collar temp environment. Going from there, had a couple of years doing some contract work as well in the internal space. I then decided to go back to agency, and I worked for 6.5 years for international recruitment company Kelly Services, which was really great experience. Had multiple roles there, including the opportunity to do some internal talent acquisition with Kelly, and also to commence my first leadership positions with Kelly. Then 3 years in government recruitment, and then very recently joined Stanley Black & Decker. In terms of the LinkedIn content, been on there for years, so not something new. What had actually stumbled and got me posting more was a colleague at Kelly had something set up. So Buffer, which some of you may or may not know, is a scheduling tool for social media, including LinkedIn, and started posting, came to enjoy it, left agency world, kept it going, kept building my personal brand, and just generally do it. Look, it's not even so much about personal brand, though that's obviously a very positive thing we should all be thinking about. But the idea is just to publish things that interest people and sometimes things that may help people along the way. So that may be a case of things that are business related. A lot of things lately have been personal, but there's always a business twist. So it might be personal, but it's juggling, say, work-life balance, say maybe family, personal activities, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and you probably hit the nail on the head, but personal branding can certainly help people if they're trying to transition to the next role, if they're trying to get headhunted or, just, I guess, noticed in terms of what accomplishments they're able to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. So, well, first of all, congratulations. I heard that it's an excellent company to be a part of. So well done on that front. I would love to, you are welcome. I would love to touch on, the talent acquisition side. And then, of course, you mentioned something really important, workplace culture, and I guess the work-life balance, especially now that a lot of us are working from home. So, in your role and perhaps in talent acquisition in general, how would you identify talent, and how do you, perhaps maybe as a second question, encourage or allow people to have a work-life balance despite working from a remote perspective?
Yeah, look, it is a tricky one, Tricia, and obviously it does depend on the nature of the company and also the nature of the role. The reality is some roles, they are what they are. I mean, there are ways around that, and I will get to that in a moment as well. From, I guess, an attraction perspective, it's an interesting one. We're sitting at unemployment at, I think it's 3.9% in Australia and around 3.1% in New Zealand, which are the main markets I focus on. So it is a very, very employees or candidate market at the moment. I believe in terms of talent attraction, it's not a one size fits all. So, for example, I'm not just going to go on LinkedIn and go in-mail. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I look at it from a whole, like circular pace. If you imagine a graph, with different slices of the pie and then working through that. So a lot of people say advertising is a waste of time. So people say traditional job platforms, including one of the large ones in Australia, is a waste of time. If you're doing it the old school way, yeah, it is. What I found is focusing on the candidate. So looking at things such as making it, what would you say? If you were selling a product or a service to someone, you would talk about this is what you get, this is what's in it for you, these are the benefits. I've taken recruitment or talent acquisition to that level and saying, okay, candidate A, here's what we're offering you, and focusing on that as the initial stages, then talking about who they are and the sort of fit for the role, and obviously skill set. We still need someone to do the job, and then about what they're doing. So it's more about that. The other thing I focus on as well is the medium the person will be looking at. So traditionally, ads have been focused on someone scrolling through their email or computer. Now we've also got to be very mindful of mobile devices and looking at going, okay, well, my ad most likely probably 70-75% chance is going to be read on a mobile. So making your ad fit for that. Now, relying on advertising in its own is sometimes going to work. That's great, but most of the time it's not. And that's where you need to start focusing on your proactive sourcing. So that can be, for example, connecting with people through your networking. That can also be direct approaches. So I'm fortunate enough in my role, I do have a tool called LinkedIn Recruiter, which many people would know, but some wouldn't. It's essentially like a very super version of LinkedIn where you can manage projects and roles. You post your advertisements from there, and you can talent map from that tool. So that's what I've been using a lot lately to gain talent. There's a couple of other sources as well, including, so Seek is a big one in Australia, New Zealand, using the back-end database of that as well, and also some Facebook groups as well. We've even had discussions in our team about how we could implement TikTok into our recruitment strategy. That's not something I've introduced, I'll take credit, but someone in my APAC team has suggested that, and it's actually a really, really good idea. So we are exploring that, whether that's a feasible.
Fantastic. I think it gives you, the different platforms gives you a 360-degree view or opinion of the candidate. So for example, LinkedIn can be, quite professional and, very down the line, whereas TikTok might be suitable for those perhaps marketeers, brand activation, brand management type profiles. So yeah, I think it's important that that you're showcasing, and it also shows the flip side of your candidate. So maybe they look great, on this platform, but actually their opinions are completely different on another platform. And when you're representing perhaps government agencies or professional bodies, you want to make sure you're hiring the right person.
Yeah, no, that's it. So, and then, sorry, back to your question, you were talking about flexibility. Do you want to just repeat that again?
Yeah. So I guess, maybe what my main interest in from your perhaps expertise is, so a bit of work-life balance. How does one manage it when working with home? A lot of people have got the young families, but they still want to making sure that they're excelling in their work. Would you have any tips for even onboarding people?
Yeah, so look, I guess first of all, I'll start with myself. I am a remote employee, so I am working, from home pretty much. So our head office for Australia, New Zealand is in Melbourne. Another one of our major sites is in Auckland. So there's not a lot of people around, but we do have people, mostly sales, but a few other people dotted around the place. So we do a lot of regular connection with teams, so a lot of online activities. Someone in our team at the moment is actually organising a team get-together, so proper night out, but night in, but with the team. So that should be fun and an activity there, which is really, really good. I've got a couple of ideas as well with our team where we're going to have an activity over time where we'll do little get to know you sessions, which is really exciting. So those things are really important. From a mental health perspective, I've got a young child at home. My wife's on maternity leave at the moment, so that's really good, able to help out. But at the same time, sometimes I need a little bit of space. So I've actually got something signed up so I can do 5 days a month at a co-working space at a great place that's just a couple of suburbs away. I also have a membership with WeWork as well. So that's something that I do where sometimes I catch up with friends and we work together. That's when I need to go out into the city. So that's a fantastic way of doing that. From an onboarding perspective, it is a little bit trickier. What I have found has worked is, look, where possible, do a face-to-face on the first day. Not always possible, but if you can, budget allows it, travel allows it, and so forth. I think that's important. If you can't, I guess the biggest barrier I've seen, and I've seen this everywhere, is technology. We've had some major, as everywhere has, supply and demand, careers. You've had people in the postal services down with COVID, so not much can be done there. So that's seen delays on technology and so forth. So having contingencies there where you can still interact with the employee. I think what's also important is, as a leader, setting up different appointments. When I say appointments, just casual catch-ups with different people in the organisation, so stakeholders, team members, and so forth, so that you get that initial rundown. I was very impressed with Stanley Black and Decker. So I actually was able to start a little bit earlier than I planned, by about a week, I think it was, and the business was very willing to accommodate me and get me on board. And it was a lot of I guess a lot of interacting with people, meeting people virtually, of course, and having those conversations and just getting to know the business slowly but surely. So we're in a period now, there's a lot of growth, and I think there's a certain amount, like say, a few days to a week is good. But then for me anyway, I like to be thrown in. So being thrown in a bit, going, here, do this, it's actually really allowed me to excel and get excited and build some fantastic relationships with people. So
fantastic. Yeah, you've given some really great advice. I think a lot of managers can take this concept of, like catch-ups, whether it's say weekly or bi-monthly catch-up, just to sort of check in with those people on the remote perspective, especially as you rightly mentioned that mental health is so important these days. So thank you so much. Yeah. I want to come back. You also mentioned a really great point. You said that at the minute the market is going well, or it's I can't recall exactly what you said, but there's a lot of growth at the minute.
Your candidate-driven market?
Yeah, candidate-driven market, and there was a lot of growth at the minute. So could you just walk us through that in terms of, is there lots of opportunities at the minute in terms of what candidates can select for, or there's been mass resignations and there's a lot of candidates available?
Yeah, look, I think you've got a bit of both in there, to be honest. So I guess point one, immigration has obviously been heavily restricted, as we all know, thanks to COVID. As a result of that, there has been a lot of expats did return home. A lot of roles that traditionally would be filled by expats, they weren't. As a result of that, things were obviously really quiet in the market for a period there, so everyone kind of kept status quo. Then people started hiring again, and even when we have had our waves of COVID and lockdowns and so forth, of course, there were certain industries that were very badly hit, which was really, really tough. But a lot of those people did gain alternative employment, and it has left some major staffing gaps, particularly in some of those face-to-face roles, such as retail, like face-to-face customer service, hospitality, and that sort of thing. Where we've also seen it, though, in the resignation is the fact that there are so many people on the market and people are looking to attract top talent. there's been a lot of growth in salaries, which our inflation rates obviously reflect as well. As a result, people, even if they're not looking, they're being approached about roles and they're coming back with X amount of money. Often it's not anything ridiculous or anything like that, but it just seems to be gradually getting higher, and therefore, as a result, people are getting offered more money to go elsewhere, and they obviously resign. Sometimes you've got counter offers back and forth, which regardless pushes the salary up no matter what they decide to stay on. And the other thing is that flexibility. Now, some roles it's easier than others, but there are some places that are fairly rigid when they may or may not have to be. So, for example, if I was in a role now, for example, a talent acquisition role, funny that example, and I was told you have to work 8 to 5, have to take lunch at this time if you got a lunch, etc., etc. I probably wouldn't bother at the moment. Whereas at the moment, the role I've got is very flexible. So, as an example, today I started at 6:30 a.m. Australian time, which is perfect to do some liaison with New Zealand stakeholders or just catch up on things like I did today. And I finish around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I go down and train with the mate down at Cronulla, which is a local beach area near to my house. And I do that twice a week. Also have the options. There was last week, I think I had a really early meeting with New Zealand, and then I had a late meeting with the UK. But you know what? Being at home and that flexibility, I was able to spend some time with my daughter, go for a walk with my 2 Tornado greyhounds, spend some time with my wife in that middle of the day and go get a coffee and all that sort of thing. And I obviously still more than did my hours. And do I really want to be finishing at 7 o'clock at night after starting very early? And it's like, well, no, not really. But I got that flexibility. I get flexibility from my employer, and it's a give and take situation. So my employer, so Stanley Black & Decker, needed me to do that, and I needed to do that to provide the best service to my stakeholder and the business. But then I've got, today it's like, well, I need for my own physical and mental health to go training, and they accommodate that. So it's like any relationship, personal relationship, friendship, marriage, family, you are all about give and take and supporting each other. And that's what you need from an employer. Mm. And the employers that do that are the ones who generally are.
Yeah. I think.
Like I said, yeah. Oh, sorry.
No.
Certain roles, obviously, it's easier said than done. But as long as there's a lot of effort to do that, and trying to do that and accommodating where they can, that does go a long way with people.
Absolutely. I think when you're trying to retain top talent, and these days it's actually, it's quite hard to find. And I know that a lot of people have retired, the age brackets that we're at is generally the older generation, specifically, I guess, the Australian New Zealand market here. We've got quite a lot of the older generation, which will be retiring, but then to be able to retain top talent where, maybe you can squeeze a couple of more years out of them or so, you need to be implementing these flexible policies that have now come about as a result of the pandemic. And certainly, though, from my Middle East experience, I guess, unfortunately, might be the word, it's not as experienced as it is in Australia or perhaps the Western parts of the world. There's a lot of pressure to perform 12, 14 plus hour days for many people, which is, and the reason perhaps why it's so different, and I want to come to how we could perhaps address that, is because the talent pools are so big. So you can be having one job and literally hundreds of applicants for the one role. And then because it's so competitive, people are expats trying to get that role. They'll be willing to put in those hours to secure a better opportunity. And especially now with all of this, with inflation occurring and, the price of everything skyrocketing, people are just not desperate, but they'll literally take any job that they can as a means to accommodate.
Yeah. Interesting. So I guess my question is, the people who are doing 12, 14 hours a day, how productive are they? I mean, I'm not asking you to tell me, but like, let's be honest, how productive can you be when you're doing that? And how's your family life affected? And at the end of the day, we're building an economy, yes, but primarily we're building a society. How my children or your children or anyone else's children go and the support they get from parents is extremely important to society as a whole. At the end of the day, our children are our future workers, leaders, CEOs, and that sort of thing. If we're not spending the time with them as well and ourselves, what impact is that going to have? That's my question.
Do you know what, Bill? That's the comment of the night. I absolutely love it. We're building a society. Absolutely. You're right. And kids see you working 24/7 and not visible at the table, at the dinner table. And then that's ingrained in them that mum or dad was always working.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like, I can't just sit at the dinner table and, hang out all day because, there's mortgage and the food and my internet and Netflix doesn't pay itself, but, there's got to be a line somewhere. So I think in Australia and New Zealand, look, there are some employers that have a long way to go, but that's where people, I guess, are leading. And what we've seen as well, and I guess this is also contributing to resignations, just to circle back, is a lot of people have done all these jobs where they've had those sort of hours, and then COVID, working from home, spending more time with family, focusing on other things has really allowed them to reevaluate that. For example, I read an article, it was one of the Australian papers, I can't remember which, but it was a gentleman who had been working in some sort of social media type role for many years that was very demanding, and he ended up starting a bakery somewhere in Australia. And another gentleman who worked in senior marketing roles had a side hobby of beekeeping, quit his marketing role and ended up focusing on our home business of like beekeeping, selling honey and that sort of thing. So you're getting a lot of that as well, where people are looking at things and it's like, okay, this will make me a good living, and it's giving me that balance as well.
Absolutely.
That may be a clear Australia, New Zealand thing, but...
No, I think this is probably global. I mean, I don't have any data to back this up at the minute, but I'm sure that there has been a mass exodus as a result of people wanting to either A, consult, or B, take on a hobby that perhaps does generate financial income, but it's not, they're not doing it because of the sole purpose of that.
No, it's something they want to do because they love it. And, like I say, you can't just say, oh, sorry, bank manager, no, I can't pay my mortgage, but I'm doing a job I love and not have your house foreclosed. But at the same time, you've got to find something that you're passionate about and enjoy. It's not just about money. Yeah, you need enough money to live and be happy, but if you're earning masses of money and you're miserable, it's not enjoyable.
No, you're right. And I think that to create a culture that accepts maybe a part-time job or a second source of income, perhaps needs to be accepted from the top down. So, especially within the Middle East region, I know that, you're based in Australia, but it's okay to have a second role, so long as that you are, of course, focused in delivering your KPIs, but not being too rigid. And just my final point on this is that, which is why specific to my region in Dubai, is that the government has allowed a second visa. You can have a freelance visa, an NOC, to have a second job. So it shows that, that this is now legal. It never used to be, which I guess is, allowing people to have this opportunity.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Bill, I definitely would love to catch you again. We are approaching the 30-minute mark, but I would certainly love to touch on perhaps, gender in terms of parental leave. I know that you're a young father, which is fantastic. And I would love to touch base, and maybe we could catch up again for a second session on parental leave and how, from a workplace, how is it from the Australian side or aspect that it's allocated, whether it's the legal is 2 weeks or whatever, but we could do a deep dive on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just a high-level overview. Well, first of all, I appreciate you using the young in front of the father bit, so that's always nice to hear. So it might be the TV, so the TV, the monitors need a good look. But no, in all seriousness, from a parental leave perspective, so legal is 12 months in Australia. In terms of paid, unpaid, a lot of that's up to the organisation. What you can get though, depending on salary, and I don't know the exact number, is up to 18 weeks paid at minimum wage. While you're also, for example, I think it's about $7.75 a week pre-tax that you can get over that time, so the primary carer can get. Other employers, for example, are in a, I guess, position where they've either adapted or financially they're able to provide more so there. So, for example, some employers may do, say, 6 months at half pay. A lot of employers are also looking at, I'm trying to think of the word. It's like where the secondary carer becomes the primary carer, so sort of like a swap, and therefore can take on that responsibility. So, as an example, I will be taking some time off later in the
year. Perfect, fantastic.
So, yeah.
Good on you. Really, really great. Well, I guess the key takeaway from my perspective out of this call is that it hasn't left my head. We are building a society, and we're trying to maintain, a strong cultural fit in terms of having a work-life balance. So what would be, maybe your final words in closing from a talent acquisition perspective and perhaps job seekers, trying their best to be noticed?
Yeah, so talent acquisition, I guess, obviously it is what it is. Like I said, candidate short market in Australia and New Zealand. What I will say, having been in it for a few years, I started when I was 10, was it all is like, swings and roundabouts. So, for example, I've seen it extremely candidate short market. When I started, it was that. I've then seen a recession where it was a job short market and there were candidates everywhere. Both are quite difficult from a talent acquisition perspective or recruitment perspective, but it's, I guess, why we exist. So just be mindful of that. Don't get, I guess, too comfortable and think, yeah, I can do this and push boundaries beyond reasonable. I mean, obviously, things are changing. Please don't think of each cut us for things, but keep it, don't cross the line, is what I'm saying, because eventually it will come back around where it is in the employer's market. In terms of getting noticed, look, there are certain ways of doing that. LinkedIn's obviously a big one. I recommend having a profile. If you are, I guess, passively looking or looking when you don't want your employer to know, there are options in LinkedIn Recruiter to tick certain boxes that show that you are looking for work. If you are openly looking for work, there is also the option on LinkedIn to tick a box in your profile that comes up with a little green circle saying open to work. So obviously it depends on whether your employer is aware or whether you're working. So that's a big consideration there. In terms of the getting noticed, so I guess if you're going to another industry, what you need to do is look at, I guess, what's transferable from that industry. So, for example, let's say I wanted to go talent acquisition into, I don't know, the media industry. I would need to focus on what I have done and what I can bring to that from a talent acquisition perspective and try and find similarities there with roles I've recruited, or just my strategic approach on things, or even operational approach to get across there. If I was looking at a totally different job, let's say marketing, I would need to focus on what I have done in my roles and try and play a marketing spin on them.
Perfect. Amazing. This is really, really great. I would like to say thank you once again for your time, and we can certainly catch up again. I can hear my little one in the background, so I better sit off. And
joys of working from home.
that's it. We will keep connected.